let's play a game. There aren't going to be any cash prizes, unfortunately, but we're still going to play. So on the screen, you'll see two fish species. One is the invasive blue catfish. The other is an iconic species in Chesapeake Bay, the striped bass. So I also have two descriptions. So these are derived from media articles. And so what we're going to do is just a simple matching game. You're going to match one of the descriptions with one of the fish. So take a second and do that. So how many of you matched these two descriptions with this fish like this? Okay, several. So what I didn't tell you was this wasn't a fair game. So I think we all recognize that striped bass are important recreational species in this area and along the Atlantic coast. But what I didn't tell you was that blue catfish also fit both of these descriptions based on the media that I used to pull descriptions from. And so one of the reasons you may have done that is, one, you didn't know it was an unfair game, but also I used the term invasive, which may have biased your perception of the phrases that I used. And so this word invasive is typically interpreted as denoting some sort of good versus bad dichotomy. And so we often think about the term invasive. It may bring up thoughts of destructive nuisance species such as lionfish in the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico, military conquests, maybe even zombies. So while invasive species have considerable economic and ecological impacts, lost track of where I'm going. The messaging that typically follows invasive species is often militaristic in tone, and as a result, can influence the way we perceive species. And so this puts management agencies in a difficult position in that they have to respond to reports of new species in their jurisdictions, but they also want to prevent additional spread. And so that often puts them in a difficult position where you're trying to balance the messaging, and that is similar to what we're seeing now with coronavirus, where you want to stress the importance of changing behavior and policy, but you don't want to create panics. So invasive species messaging is similar to that. And so the blue catfish was introduced in Virginia in the 1970s and 1980s, and has since expanded to extreme abundances and also taken a much larger range than it was originally intended. And so this created a lot of concern among stakeholders in the region due to the fact that blue catfish attain pretty considerable sizes, as you can see there, and also due to their predatory behavior and the extreme abundances previously mentioned. And this has kind of been exacerbated by the fact that media and stakeholders have exaggerated blue catfish's biology and behavior, which has then kind of polarized a lot of the stakeholders. And so a lot of the stakeholders have said things along the lines of blue catfish are eating everything in the bay, when in fact a study out of Virginia Tech has supported that most of blue catfish's diet is non-native mollusks and vegetation. Now, there is a small proportion of their diets that are fish-based, and it also includes several species that are of management concern. And given the scale of the population, it is certainly concerning. But a lot of the exaggerations have been kind of overblown. And so one example of that is the blue catfish, and these are quotes from news articles, is that the blue catfish is a predator on par with the shark. This isn't just at the top of the food chain, it's a whole new trophic level. And so when we talk about trophic levels, a lot of times we think about it in a numerical way, from 1 to 5, where 1 are plants and other autotrophic organisms, 5 are apex predators. And here are some things you may be familiar with to kind of give you an idea of that scale. We estimated blue catfish's trophic level in a study from Virginia Tech, and blue catfish was about 2.9, lower trophic level than Atlantic silverside. And that's mostly driven by the large proportion of plants in their diet. So in cases like this, we can see that exaggerations may possibly influence the way people perceive the species. So here's some ways we can improve on invasive species messaging. we need to clarify the language. The term invasive is used interchangeably and could mean different things. In fact, it's often used as a substitute for the word non-native. And as we can see here, the largemouth bass is non-native to tidal rivers in Virginia, likely not considered invasive in most circles. So there's an issue with how we phrase these different things. We need to avoid hyperbole. A lot of the exaggerations I mentioned previously were not quite accurate and were based without science. So we need to stress that blue catfish fit within the bay and its ecosystem impairment that has been going on for a long time now. We need to wait for the science. A lot of the hyperbole that was coming out wasn't supported with science, but was shared anyway. So we need to make sure that we wait for the science to be done, and also scientists need a greater role in sharing their work. And that's something that we've been doing as part of my Virginia Sea Grant Fellowship, is sharing science and just general catfish information on the ChesapeakeCatfish.com blog. And we also need to stress uncertainty. We don't know everything, and I think that we're typically aware of that, but we need to make sure that the public understands what we do and don't know about both the systems we study and the future world that we're going to live in. So in terms of blue catfish, how we can move forward is blue catfish should be managed from a multi-stakeholder perspective based on structured decision-making and bringing in stakeholders to help understand what the objectives, goals, and strategies we can use to balance the trade-offs of recreational fishing and invasive species impacts. We also need to consider a more holistic approach. Blue catfish isn't the only problem. We have issues of nutrient pollution, overharvest, and so blue catfish is one part of the puzzle, but it's not the entire problem. And I think that if we look at a larger scale and incorporate the stakeholders more, we can, and through messaging, we can have a better feel for how to influence people's economic, social, and cultural aspects of their lives. And thank you.